Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name's Shona Reid. I am the CEO at Reconciliation SA, and thanks for joining in on a 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, and it's really great to have you with us. Hopefully you can bear with my technology and my capacity to do technology, but we're here today because we're having a bit of a webinar. We have Sally Scales, the wonderful Sally Scales, the amazing Arrin Hazelbane, and the wonderful Ashum Owen with us. Thank you very much, guys, for joining us. And I wouldn't dare introduce you all. You've got an amazing collection of experience, and especially around your involvement in the Uluru statement specifically. But I'll let you do that in a second. But before we go any further, I thought it's really important that I am able to do an acknowledgement of country as per protocol, and that I would like to acknowledge that and pay our deepest respects to First Nations peoples whose lands we're gathering on today. There are lots of people from lots of different places at the moment, so please think about the country you're on. I'm an Eastern Arina woman, and I feel very privileged to be on Kaurna land that I'm talking on today. I also acknowledge the special and enduring spiritual and physical connection to country, and that sovereignty of First Nations people has never been ceded. We pay our respects to the many First Nation elders, leaders, and those teachers that have come before us, that are guiding us now, and those who will guide us into the future. We gather today in the spirit of respect for First Nations peoples, and I hope that the conversation today is seen to honour this. So thank you for coming on board. I really don't want to do much talking because I'm not an expert in this space, I have to say. I'm just the facilitator of conversations. I would love to throw firstly to a wonderful lady that I've known for a while now, Sally Scales. Sally, hello, how are you? Are you able to take yourself off mute? And are you
Hi. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday, Sal. I was just hoping if you could give a brief introduction to yourself, but also give us a little bit of an understanding around you were a pretty important person in at Uluru in 2017. It'd be lovely to hear from you about that particularly for our viewers today.
Thank you for having me, Shona, and all of us as young people. I think it's always incredible when organisations give us space. So thank you, or elder youth as we're now being called. I also would like to acknowledge the lands that I am on, the Kaurna land, and for me, they're elders and leaders, and also the young leaders that are coming up. So it's always great to see the incredible generational leadership that comes through as a young person as well. So and also my elders from the APY lands, so the Bidanyara young Kunjara people who are such bosses and who've given me everything that I could possibly have to be the person I am. So when Uluru happened, so 2017 was a big year, and for me personally, but also with the dialogues that started in 2016 actually. So the Referendum Council, after a long process of wanting to have consultation, there'd already been sort of reviews and reports done on reconciliation, and obviously we know what happened with reconciliation, recognised, and that movement and stuff like that. And so it was really about picking that up and actually doing it in a targeted consultation process. And I was invited to the Ross River one first. As a Central Australian woman, that was always great. It's always great to go to Ross River as well. And, what was amazing about Ross River, and also the dialogues, I don't think people know about this, is that the Referendum Council did an incredible job in tailoring that so that the invited delegates were community members who didn't have an access already, didn't have an access to have their voices being heard. Quite often, you'll see the same group of leadership being asked to do things. So they really wanted to branch out and get more community involvement. So 60% of the delegation weren't tied to an organisation or a business or anything like that. It was really just community members. And then 40 were obviously reps from organisations, which, you know, you think about native title groups or like land council groups or just community councils and things like that. And so what they also had done in Central Australia, in Ross River, is they gotten together with the interpreters for all of those language groups and had a whole process where they went through all of what that was going on with the dialogues, so that all the interpreters had the background to have that conversation with TOs in their own language. Sammy Wilson, who's a Mudijulu man, he's the traditional owner of Mudijulu and Uluru, quite often says, I don't like talking in English. My brain is not wired that way. So when I can talk in language, I know which road I'm traveling. And, you know, he sometimes compares the two languages to a square and a circle. And I think that was the purpose of getting interpreters into that room, to have that space where those, you know, elders could sit and have a conversation in their language about what was important. And, you know, for me, as someone who's a part of this whole dialogues, and, you know, then I also pushed to be involved in the Adelaide dialogue, because I think just because I'm from APY, I guess I'm from Central Australia, but it's two different. So it was really interesting to note the differences in Northern Territory and South Australia when you've got, in a sense, state protection, which Northern Territory doesn't have. So, you know, we can see that with the intervention and things like that, which was a huge topic for community members there. And when what happened, you know, and Arrin was one of the Wiggles, one of the people supporting, and had 5 different sort of conversations. So it was around the race power, about the voice, about treaty, the truth-telling element and all of that. And so going to both of them, and it was actually at Ross River where Craig Woods, who's the CEO of Mudijulu Community, said, I think we should have the convention at Uluru. You know, it's the heart of our nation. It's where it should be. And you got to think, this is a community that was completely blackballed by the intervention, and who was constantly had all sorts of media on them. To open it up and say, bring it back here, was amazing. And, you know, I think Arrin can concur with this. It was, what was amazing about it at the convention is when you're a young person in a room of almost 250 Aboriginal leaders from across the country, which is a rarity in itself, because you got to remember, it's not a football occasion. It's not a walk across a bridge. It's not a long walk. It's not a, you're not going to somewhere where it's, you know, the national sorry, you know, you're hearing the apology. This was the first time a whole group of Aboriginal people were together and doing a really hard work about what they wanted for the future of their generation, for their kids' generation and grandkids' generation, and sitting there and saying, we don't have a voice. Also, you know, all of our national orgs, we don't know them. We don't believe that they are giving us a voice. And, you know, we need, as community mob, as countrymen, we need a voice. We need to be able to talk about what works, because unfortunately, when it comes to a lot of Aboriginal policies and procedures and all of that, and laws that impact First Nations communities, it's a one shoe fits all. They think what works for Cape York will work for Ghana, what works for APY will work for, you know, it's or Noongar country, all of that sort of stuff. It's like, oh, it's all the same. And it's actually, well, no, each nation is different. And also people forget that some are metro and some are regional. So you've got to actually tailor it and look at it in that way. And I actually think the Australian government does that a lot, where they compare remote to regional all the time, remote to metro all the time. And so having that discussion about, well, we need to be at the table. We need to have a voice at the table about what we want for our communities, what we need, what works and what doesn't work, you know. And then the process of the treaty, you know, once you're at the table, you can have that discussion about treaty processes, whether it's we saw what happened with South Australia. As soon as the new government came in, the treaty process was swiped away, or dropped, or whatever other word you want to use for that. And so, you know, and the Victorian treaty process has been done really well, but it's also been able to, that's because it was the same government, and you've also time restricted by 3 years to do it. But I think, and then also it worries me a little bit with treaty processes and things like that, because unless you have something like The Voice, are we going to see the same things that happens to our First Nations brothers and sisters in New Zealand, in North America, where they have treaties, but the treaties have never been really put in, you know, it's not ever been really amended or looked at, or, you know, everyone talks about how great the Treaty of Waitangi is, but when you talk to First Nations and New Zealanders, they don't think that, you know, it's a little bit when they need more. And also, the truth of this history of Australia is what we definitely need to hear as well. And it's not just the hand-picked truth that people want to listen to. It is the massacres, it is things like Maralinga, but there's also incredible stories of First Nations people and trading routes to Papua New Guinea, to Asia, that we don't fully know, but they're there because of, you know, top end mob talk about it all the time. So, you know, people forget that there is good and bad histories of Australia, and we all need to learn about them, and we all need to share it. And I think what we forget as well is that why it's so important for all of us, it's a gain for First Nations people, and it's not a loss for the wider community. You don't lose anything, we gain something. We just want to be able to be on an equal footing so that our children and the children that follow aren't in the same state. You know, we're not constantly begging for the bare scraps. We just want the basic necessities that everyone else in this fair country gets. So I think that's where people forget that. And it's so, like, the Uluru Statement is hopeful. You know, it's about hope. It's asking for the Australian communities to walk with us. And I think that's what's also been forgotten, is the fact that the Uluru Statement wasn't gifted to parliamentarians. It wasn't gifted to them. It was gifted to the Australian people. And I think Australia has also forgotten that they have the power. We as voters have the power to change our lives. You know, we vote to keep the worst party out. You know, it's about making sure we do what we need to do. And it's just having that, we've got to remember it's for all of us. And this was presented, the Uluru Statement was presented to all of us.
Sally, can I ask a question? Sorry, I was supposed to be quiet, but I thought.
You quiet?
You've been on the speak. You know, you do a lot of talks around the Uluru Statement and the journey that it's taken, and talked a little bit about that hope, and it was quite a gracious gift that was provided to the Australian community. Do you think it's being taken up, or do you think that you know, we're on track to actually taking up that offer and that invitation as a wider society? Well,
after the interim report for the Tom Karma and Marcia Langton reports, the submissions has now been extended to April. That's where if you support the Uluru Statement, if you support what First Nations people are wanting, that's where you can write a submission and say, you know, the voice to power is very important. The voice for Aboriginal people are very important. And I think, you know, we know that with reconciliation, the barometer is changing. People are a little bit more aware and more than willing to actually step up when they see that as well, rather than being the warrior at one incident, actually constantly having those conversations of saying, this is systemic, this is wrong, don't do this, and calling each other and checking each other out. And so I think that's changed. And I think it's been 4 years since Uluru. It'll be 4 years in May. And what we see is more and more people, like I think it's around 90%, 90 or more support of First Nations voice and support that change happening. So it's something that we are really hopeful for. And I think that's the thing, everyone realizes it's not it's not something where it's fickle or something. It's real, it's tangible, it's just let's make a change. You know, you've gotten so many Supreme Court justices who've, you know, former ones have all supported it. And, you know, this is what I constantly say, it's not the law that's the problem, it's politics. And so it's this is where we need the Australian people to say enough is enough to the politicians, and saying let's move it, let's change it.
Awesome. Thanks. Well, that's kind of a really good segue, because I was going to throw to Ashum, in keeping to our time schedule just a little bit. I was going to throw to Ashum. Ashum, I'll let you introduce yourself, but I was keen to explore the difference between, or the differences between the Indigenous voice process undertaken by the federal government and the Uluru Statement. And anyway, I'll let you go. I'll get off and I'll throw to you. But if you could let us know who you are, that would be wonderful.
No worries. So my name is Ashum Owen. I am a proud Kaurna and Narungga Ngarrindjeri woman from Adelaide. I'm currently working in Darwin at a Aboriginal family legal service. So I'd like to recognise the history and the traditional owners of Larrakia land on which I'm on, and pay my respects to their elders. So I graduated Flinders in 2018 with a double degree in law and psychology. And so, as I said, I'm now practicing in Darwin. I'm practicing in child protection, family law, domestic violence, that kind of area. And I was invited to attend as a, I guess, young leader, or as Sally likes to say, a little bit older youth now. So I was invited to attend the Youth Dialogue Summit in Cairns in 2019, and that was a really eye-opening experience for me. I hadn't been involved too much in the dialogues before the Uluru Statement was gifted, but after that summit, I definitely found that, you know, my values align with the Uluru Statement in terms of, you know, studying law. Really showed me how disempowered and disregarded we are as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in this country since colonisation. And I just thought, you know, there's really a space there where our voices really need to be heard, especially, you know, when it comes to decision making over our own lives and our communities. So I think that the Uluru Statement definitely provides a pathway for autonomy and self-determination for our mob. And it's very important. I think, you know, something really powerful that stands out to me from the statement is that, you know, they say, when we have power over our destiny, our children will flourish. And I think that's definitely a reason why I'm doing the work that I'm doing personally, professionally, and with the Uluru Statement. So now that I've introduced myself, I will go over a little bit of the differences and similarities between the Uluru Statement, like the voice that came out of the Uluru Statement that we've, like the Aboriginal community have proposed, versus the NIA voice that co-design process. So I guess the key differences that I see from these proposals are that the Uluru Statement was a community-led grassroots movement, and it wasn't something new. It progressed from colonisation. We've been asking for a voice. We've been asking for more power, for more equality for a long, long time. It's not just something that we thought, oh, maybe that will work. You know, we've had such strong, powerful activists fighting for our rights for hundreds of years. I think that it provides a pathway for self-determination, like I said before, and it would be a voice to Parliament, protected and enshrined as an enabling provision in the Constitution. I guess the difference with the NIA voice is that it was a government-led process and it came about because of Uluru. I think that's something really key to think about as well, that the work that our people did created this process. So they are proposing that there will be a national and local and regional voices to both government and parliament, whereas and it wouldn't be enshrined and protected by the Constitution. These proposals are basically saying that they want to establish this voice through legislation or as a statutory body under like the Corporations Act. So this doesn't provide enough protection that for longevity of the voice, I suppose. It could easily be abolished by successive governments, depending on their priorities, I suppose, and their political views. So I think that is one key thing about the Uluru voice compared to the Ngaya voice, is that we want something that will stand for a number of generations, not just one term for the next Prime Minister to kick it out. And I think that the Uluru proposals, it goes a bit further than just symbolic recognition, which I guess was a big issue for a lot of mob around the country in terms of, like the Recognise campaign. We really want something that will have real and tangible change in our lives around decision-making that affects us. That's my 2 little cents about that at the moment. I thought I might just touch on, the importance of our voice. Without it at the moment, the Australian government is able to make laws under the race powers, like Sally touched on that really quickly, and that race power from the Constitution has really only been used to pass laws negatively against Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in the past. So I think the voice to Parliament under the Uluru Statement proposal would make sure that we have a say around laws that are made for us and about us, and that, we have that power and we are empowered. And that's all that we're asking. I really echo what Sally said before around, it doesn't take away anything from anyone else. It's really just giving Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people a leg up and, more equity.
Sorry, unmute. Awesome. Thanks, Ashum. Sally, did you, or Arrin, did you have anything to add to Ashum's conversation around the difference between the voice process or the Ngaya voice submission process and the Uluru Statement, or that pretty much covered it?
I might touch upon that in a moment, Shona. I might just introduce myself, and there's some amazing things that Sally and Ashum both touched upon that I've kind of sparked, some really good talking points that, I was just bubbling away on that. But I'll start off just by acknowledging that I joined today from the land of the Kaurna people, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present. I also acknowledge emerging leaders, and I also acknowledge the strong Aboriginal women that joined me today. It's amazing to be surrounded by fierce advocates for our families and communities, and I just want to take that moment to recognise everything that you do in your spaces as well. It does not go unrecognised. As mentioned, my name's Arrin, and I'm a Warai with a young man. My mother's family are from the far west coast of South Australia, and my father's family are from the Finniss River region in the Northern Territory. And I'm very lucky to have quite a large family across the country. And, now see myself having lived and worked in Adelaide for some time. As Sally mentioned, I was lucky to be engaged by Auntie Cheryl Axelby and Uncle Candy Wanganeen as a facilitator at the Regional Dialogue in Adelaide. And, as a young 20-year-old, then it was a very hard discussion. I'm asked whether I wanted to speak to the topic of the race power. And, you know, growing up in the Northern Territory and moving to Adelaide, you know, for my tertiary education, I, you know, very quickly garnered a very strong understanding of the race power, its interpretation and application, the impacts that it's had on you know, Aboriginal people in South Australia, particularly around Hindmarsh Island. So it was a very bold area for me to be facilitating. Went into it, you know, to be able to be involved in those breadth of discussions are just eye-opening. You know, those opportunities come very often. And, you know, Sally spoke about the composition of attendance at the regional dialogues, and it was, in my short time, it was the first that I've seen, you know, community, our Aboriginal community controlled sector, Aboriginal leaders, Aboriginal elders all together to address something that isn't entirely new, you know, the concept of a voice and representation, you know, is something that I've had instilled in me from my father from an early age around Aboriginal land rights and the land, you know, in the Land Rights Act in the Territory in the early 90s. And that kind of same power and passion was ignited in me through the, you know, through the elders and community members that participated at the regional dialogues. So straight away I was, you know, I had taken away a huge amount of, I guess, empowerment. I felt, you know, I had a bit of a fire to, you know, really think that, you know, this is now the time on the back of Recognise and a few other things that, you know, unfortunately didn't turn out, you know, didn't go as intended. You know, subsequently, I was fortunate to attend the National Constitutional Convention in 2017 as a South Australian delegate. And you know, that my involvement in that process, similar to the regional dialogues, was, you know, it's one of those experiences that goes down in the history books. You know, to be there, and I'm glad that Sally mentioned, but you know, growing up with Uncle Sammy Wilson as a young boy and seeing his role in that community, Uncle J.R. Kett, Auntie Pat Anderson, Megan, who many of us idolise. And to see them, you know, really rising to the occasion, and, you know, to see so many Aboriginal people from across the nation, you know, in the heart of our nation was, you know, something that I'll forever treasure. I want to go to some of the, you know, I know that we're quite lucky today to have a number of listeners tuning in, and, you know, I thank you so much. It is great to see the conversation picking back up in South Australia after a bit of time now. And I don't necessarily have challenges to throw at you, but, you know, I think from my experience, and I've spoke about this quite often, but, you know, Aboriginal Australia are the minority in this country. And when it comes to issues like this and, you know, the politics which we are discussing, numbers matter, you know, votes matter. And when you are underrepresented, you know, you know, in the democracy that we live in, fair participation is critical. And from my experience and the experience of my family, and, you know, I'm sure others can relate to this, but, you know, the minority that we experience in this country is a defining feature of our condition. It is, you know, I know that, you know, other Aboriginal advocates talk about it, you know, about the mice and the elephant kind of description, but, you know, the minority, it's something that's really, you know, has struck a chord with me, because, you know, the statement echoes that concept as being the torment of our powerlessness. And it really is true. And I think it's, you know, that's when we need to call upon all Australians, as the statement being a gift to us as a nation, to champion the Uluru statement moving forward. You know, all of us are in places of power, privilege, and influence. And, you know, equally, we have a responsibility to preference and privilege the voice of Aboriginal people. They are very strong words, but, you know, each of you within your own environment need to be having discussions with your Aboriginal colleagues, Aboriginal friends, Aboriginal people with lived experience, to start talking about these concepts. They aren't new, they're just appearing under a different name now, somewhat. You know, I guess the issue in that is I can't dictate how you do listen to Aboriginal voices. All that I ask is that you do listen. You know, the experience of Aboriginal people in South Australia is very rich. They have a lot to offer. Just in my circles, I'm quite privileged to, I guess, have a lot of family that are young people, but also, you know, we are seeing a booming population of Aboriginal young people in South Australia and across the nation. And I think we need to amplify the youth voice as well, you know, the creativity and innovative nature of what they are presenting things, and, you know, how they are, you know, posing solutions to some very difficult societal issues that we've struggled for many years now. You know, is a good indication of, you know, the roadmap ahead. And, you know, I've listening to Sally and Ashum, you know, for me, it's been a number of years now, having been involved as a facilitator, delegate, and, you know, somewhat of an advocate now, in trying to keep, you know, the statement from the heart alive. You know, it is. It's not that long ago in the time of, you know, politics, and I think that, you know, it's important that we don't lose sight of what, you know, what the statement of the heart presented to us as a nation, which is a roadmap forward, a very clear roadmap around, you know, what Aboriginal people from across the country have asked for, and how we get there, and how those views and, you know, how those views are respected. You know, I'm not saying that the current approach by the current government is a total deviation, but I think that there are some very clear differences in processes in the way that Aboriginal voices are heard. And, you know, I'm a huge advocate in saying, you know, that the Indigenous designed and Indigenous led process that was the, you know, that was the Uluru statement, is something in itself that we need to cherish. The roadmap, you know, was, you know, I guess the product of the production. And, you know, I think we need to give equal value to both of those. I've kind of got a lot to discuss, Shona. I'm wondering whether there's anything that you want me to touch upon. I think, you know, it's something that's so heartfelt to a lot of us that it does evoke a lot of emotions, especially when it has become so extremely politicized.
No, absolutely. No. And I think you can take yourself off mute, Sally and Ashum, if you like, and we can kind of have a bit of a, you know, group yarn, because that's when it, you know, all the good stuff comes out as well. Not that, you know, everything beforehand wasn't good, it was so deadly. But one of the things that I get asked a lot, and a question that popped up in one of our admin emails, is that it seems like every state's doing things differently, and does it matter? And, you know, will it impact what the Uluru Statement's about? Can I open that up to the three of you for a bit of a chit chat?
I'll start, sorry, I just jumped straight in. My problem with all the states are doing something different, and this is, this can be the treaty processes. There's now Northern Territory and Queensland are doing theirs. Victoria's finished or finishing. My problem is there's nothing to protect them, in the sense that, the Commonwealth is a superseding lawmaker for us, especially in the Territory. So as Ashum touched on, what happens when the new government comes in? What happens if and also these treaty negotiations, some of them don't have any monetary value with them, so what's that going to mean for reparations? And also how is that also going to impact on native titles and things like that? So all of those things I look and go, well, where is the support mechanisms to protect that? Also, how are we going to protect that for long term? Because we forget how many times Aboriginal people have put in a report of the referendum council. I think there was something like a report every year was given by the referendum council or groups like that to say, this is what Aboriginal people want. This is what, we saw what happened in the national context when they had the report for the Royal Commission into the aged care facilities. How many times have there been a Royal Commission into deaths in custody and nothing's changed? Like we have it constantly. Aboriginal people are giving information, are doing the work, and we get to a space of a roadblock of too hard. We'll just kick that down the road, and we'll keep attraction, and anything that will happen is now Aboriginal people's fault. Because that's what the NIA report is essentially saying, is that the roles of Aboriginal people goes back to the states. So it will go back. So this is pre-1967. So it's taking Aboriginal people's responsibilities and their rights to individual states to do it how they want to do it. Now, none of us have lived through what happened before that, but we all know the stories of it. We all know what happened. And so that's a scary component of what is this going to do for all of us? Is it also going to strip away all of these organizations that we've built up with the hard work of our leadership and our elders? Are they going to have any weight to it either? Like, it's really concerning what the NIA report's putting out. I haven't read it fully because it was something like 300 pages, and they had it until you had to put your submissions in, was the end of this month, but they obviously listened and continued it on until the end of April. And what was concerning is one of the authors of that report said in a forum in Victoria, said, well, if there's any reports that submissions that mention the voice, we're not going to read them. So it was a mandated saying, nah, we're not going to, if there's anything about the voice to power, we're just not going to read it. So you think about it. So that's where we need people to bombard it and say, we want Aboriginal people to have a voice. But yeah, it's, and that's the things that people can do anyway, like, organizations, individual, family groups, do a submission and say, the Reconciliation SA has done an incredible submission, which is so detailed and so wonderfully done, where this is an organization that's gone through the work, and it was an incredible submission, Shona. So
thank you.
But that's what it doesn't have to be as big as what Reg SA has done, but it's what those things that we can do. And it also breeds into, we want to live in a society that's at equal footing, that has equality, and it also touches on those things about reconciliation. I mean, don't you want your children to learn about the truth of this country? Don't you want their playmates to have the same rights and that your children get? So it all goes back to that. But yeah, I forgot what the start of the question was.
I'll jump in. I think we've arrived now, Shona, at a place of, I guess, where, you know, the historical trajectory has really amped up, I guess, different approaches to the concept of equal balance, equal voice, appropriate representation. However, what we're seeing in different jurisdictions are competing notions of the Aboriginal voice and representation. You know, alongside that is a level of mischief, I think, both within the political sphere, but also within the community. And I would probably not be doing myself any good if I also didn't mention, you know, the somewhat competing views of Aboriginal community members as well. You know, nevertheless, I think that there is an element in this that Aboriginal people are being sidelined by competing notions of what various governments think Aboriginal recognition should look like. In South Australia, we've been through different iterations of that. The Northern Territory are now going down a space. Victoria, you know, have made, you know, vast, you know, changes in the way that they're engaging in, you know, on a jurisdictional basis. I still come back to the fact that we have a clear roadmap outlined in the Uluru Statement from the Heart. And, you know, some of our most distinguished and respected constitutional experts in the country have talked about the need to have a federal foundation to ensure that the voice has the right powers and is positioned in a way that allows us to advocate meaningfully but also put forward our voices, you know, in the debate of this nation. It's a hard one because, you know, we speak to a lot of, I guess, people that speculate about the success of it, and they put it down to the fact that, you know, recognition at a minimal level will only succeed in a preambular, I guess, notion within the preamble of the Australian Constitution. But I think we're really not understanding the concept of Aboriginal voice if that's all that we're taking out of the Uluru Statement from the Heart.
Yep. Awesome. We have 15 minutes left, and I just wanted to know, one of the things I was going to ask is, you know, as you think about, are you guys planning to do a submission into the NIA report? And if you are, what would be your 3 messages that you would shove in there? You know, kind of just to get the thinking juices flowing for people online today. Jump in, whoever wants to go first.
I see you going on mute there, Arrin. Is that a subtle sign you're not going to do it?
Look, I'm not.
I suppose the key messages is constitutionally enshrined voice. So it's not a legislative, because we want that to go, we want it to be there for the long term, and we need to be in the birth certificate of this country, which is the Constitution, if we're going by paper value. So we need to be on that. And it's also voice, the Uluru Statement, you can add in all sorts of stuff from that. As Arrin said, the roadmap is there in the Uluru Statement. I think it's also really important before you do your submissions to read the statement a couple of times. I think there's, you know, when you read it the first time, yes, it's powerful, but it's a lot. So slow it down, read it through, and look at what the Aboriginal people that were at Uluru and during all those dialogues are wanting to put in. So yes.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, you know, my key messages would be around empowering Aboriginal people, not only through the voice, like Arrin said, that can't be the only thing that you take out of the statement, but, you know, around our truth telling, around our rights and treaty rights as well. That's really important. I think that you know, the Uluru Statement was so important because it really put, you know, articulated really well how Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people are feeling since 67, I suppose. You know, they say, you know, we were counted, but now we want to be heard. You know, it's time for us to, I guess, take our place as leaders of our own lives and our communities. And something else I just wanted to share is that on the Uluru Statement website, there's a submission generator. If you're not sure how to start a submission, that it asks you a few questions and then generates a letter that you can submit to NIA for the interim voice report response. I'm happy to type that into the thing for everyone as well if you want, Shona.
Yes, please.
No.
Arrin, now you can unmute.
A few points there. They are somewhat connected. You know, they are kind of open for interpretation, which is encouraged given, you know, there is so much that is encompassed in the Uluru Statement from the heart, but also the production to get there. You know, you know, it's acknowledging that the architects of reconciliation and, you know, the fight for truth and justice that's embodied within the Uluru Statement from the heart. You know, it's I hope that if people do provide a submission, that they can relate it to their experience, you know, the narrative of this nation and, you know, what has been the shared national experience. And, you know, we have seen, you know, attempts at recognition and, you know, truth and justice over many years. And they've, you know, for me, they've always gotten so close, yet, you know, haven't been successful. And this is the opportunity, this is the time. For me, there's no revisiting constitutional reform after this time around. If we don't get it right this time, you know, I've got a young baby on the way, and I think how unfortunate it would have to be for them to carry this burden when they come into this, you know, into this world. Do not take your power and your influence for granted. We all have a role to play. And, you know, I think that if we can both unite and embark on this journey of championing the Uluru Statement, I think that, you know, at the end of this, you know, we will see success in, you know, in ways that the Uluru Statement from the heart calls for.
Yep. Awesome. Thanks, Arrin. I mean, I often get asked, and I know I'm not a speaker on the panel today, but I often get asked around, you know, people feel so distant from the Uluru Statement, that this was such a federal political national movement, and often get asked, well, what does it mean for me? And I, you know, I think one of the things that's resonated the most in conversations has been around, what role do you play as individuals in this space? You know, how do you amplify and elevate First Nations voice in your world, in your workplace, in your personal life? How do you allow that to, you know, enable that to happen? How do you make agreements? You know, you were talking about procurement agreement, not just procurement agreements, but, you know, how do you make agreements with First Nations peoples and communities? How do you do that? How do you engage in that? Because that's your, you know, your common understanding, your mutual respect component. And then finally, how do you understand the truth of your history with First Nations community, not just the one you're living on, but the one you were born on? You know, they're different. You know, for me, personalizing it, has been a really useful way. Sorry, Arrin, I'm cutting you off. I'm going to get off.
It goes with your the points that you're raising, Shona, but that's the kind of what I, when I speak to people, whether it be in the work setting, sports, friends of friends, anywhere really, I don't have my shirt on today, it's worn out.
It does.
I always put a question to people, just as for them to go away and think about. But I always say, where would we be and what would Australia be without Aboriginal people? We talk about a national fabric and, the songs, stories, dream times, dances, like they're all gifts that we share with Australia. And, we will continue to gift and share all of that with Australia. And, that question of, us having shared, this space, for so long, what does that mean to people and how do they perceive, our plight?
Yeah. I've just got a question. I've got a question that's popped up online. So my technical capacities are limited and I can't unmute attendees, but I do have a question from Billy to the panelists. Billy is a Gamilaroi man, and he's asked a question around in South Australia around, we have got the Uluru statement. Have we set any timelines around when it's going to get delivered on? Because there's been so many good proposals that have been made in the past. And can we, let's remember, it was 2017 that the Uluru statement was, I suppose, gifted to the nation. We're now in 2021. That's a whole, 4 years, I think my maths is right, heading into 5 years. Are we ever setting any deadlines? I mean, Sally, you're working with Megan, Professor Megan Davis, a fair bit on the Uluru statement work that she's been doing. Is there any timelines setting or anything like that that's been done to progress this?
One of the things we constantly have to do is educate all the politicians as well around what Aboriginal people wanted. And it's also, this comes up to a previous point raised, is that everyone thinks that Aboriginal people all think alike. I would just want to say it's okay that we think differently from each other. It's okay that we, I think unfortunately all minorities are treated as that we have the one stock standard answer. And I turn around and say, well, are you sure that all non-Indigenous people particularly like one politician who is from Queensland? I won't say her name. What we're doing with the Uluru statement is we've made constantly having the thing. So what we really needed to do is to go to a referendum. And to get to a referendum is that we need more people to tell the government it needs to go to a referendum. And so as a part of the submissions is saying, Uluru, with the Uluru statement, voice to power, this needs to be constitutionally enshrined. The only way that can be done is through a referendum. So hopefully when it's called, that's when we would get, the timeline would be to get everyone to whatever the question is, whether in that it's a yes or no, when it's getting the majority of the country and the majority of the states to say yes.
Yep.
So that's the timeline that we need. But again, that timeline, it just depends on whether this is something that the current government will do, to whether they'll do it to take the eyes off them around all of the stuff that's going on in Parliament House now, with all of their dirty laundry being laid out. Bad choice of words there, Sally. It will just see, and I think it's and I don't think it's really necessarily waiting for Labor to be back in government. I think it's about making sure that we're ready for whenever, and it's just forcing the government to do that, to go to a referendum.
Cool.
And I think, Shona, just to add to that before you jump to another question, maybe, is that you know, on the concept of timelines and you know, I guess political appetite, you know, there's often been a wave of criticism that's been, you know, that has been somewhat, you know, piggybacked on, you know, the Uluru Statement from the Heart, that Aboriginal communities are not ready. I think it's fair to say that we are ready. You know, we're in a position to negotiate, and we have been for some time. And, you know, I gotta go out on a limb here, but I think, you know, there is a lot of fault that lays fairly and squarely with the political class in Australia. You know, I think that, you know, that our current leadership has to acknowledge, I guess, nationwide, the position that Aboriginal people are in to enter into these very, you know, what are going to be very difficult discussions, but they are ready.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's the important thing in terms of the referendum. Like we've seen, like the history of referendums in this country, we want to make sure that we get it right. Otherwise, who knows? I mean, to answer, Marilyn's posted a question there about if we don't get the right outcome out of the referendum, then, you know, I'm not really sure where we would be at, because I think that would be really disheartening if we went to a referendum and didn't get the outcome that we wanted. Which is,
but sorry, just to go on that, Ashum, is that that would be a disappointment for all of us.
Yeah,
because this is where we need everyone. You know, Aboriginal people were a low percentage, you know, and the Uluru Statement leadership have been doing an incredible job. I don't know if people have seen, you know, Pat Anderson has done an amazing job working with SBS and translated the Uluru Statement into multiple languages, which is so incredible. And we're doing it, translating into Aboriginal languages. So, you know, it's getting that message across about what we want. And this is the hopes and aspirations for Aboriginal people that was at Uluru, but also Aboriginal people for decades. You know, it's about wanting our country and, you know, having it as a whole, you know, and it breeds into all of that. You know, it's something that it piggybacks off all the work that Reconciliation Australia and SA have done around, you know, when we talk about reconciliation for kids and adults and what that means about making sure we have conversations about systemic racism. This is about having a chance to talk about, you know, what we need as a country to heal, and it's about making sure that our minorities and our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities have a voice in their country. You know.
Yeah.
So you know, all well and good, I guess, for every Aboriginal.
But don't think negative just yet. Let's be positive. Let's go.
And you know, to answer Marilyn's, you know, to speak to Marilyn's question, for me, it's, you know, the result of this process, in particular, if we do go to a referendum, will become a part of our narrative. You know, if we look at, you know, the history of the Australian narrative so far, that is filled by frontier wars. It's filled by stolen wages, stolen generations, you know, child removals. You know, the position that we are in today is not something that has just happened yesterday. It has been the experience and the narrative of our people for a very long time. And, you know, don't sit by and let this fall apart of the narrative be the change that we want.
Absolutely. Well, you know what, guys, it's 4:59. I had a few people throw up their hands at the last minute and have posed a whole bunch of questions, and I'm really sorry, but I do, you know, like to keep to my time frames. But well, kind of because I never do myself. But look, I really appreciate the time that you have all provided to us, and being brave and courageous. There are so many people. I don't know if everyone knows, but there were 11, 12 delegates that went from South Australia to Uluru. We're hoping to be able to, connect with all those delegates and provide opportunities for them all to share and contribute to this space and in greater inform. And it's a people's movement at the end of the day. I think, the Uluru Statement isn't funded by some big mysterious corporation that creates a huge entity that can help push this. This needs to be pushed by people, and people power is the way to get this through. And that's what Reconciliation SA we are all about, is around people power. We are really stoked that you gave your time today, and really appreciative that you felt that you thought it was important enough to allow and be so gracious to spend that time with us. I'm just going to share my screen quickly. So just in summing up, some of the things that you can do as listeners online is, if you've not heard of the Uluru Statement, please read it. The links were in the chats. If you want to understand it more, there is a great video. Go and seek it and watch it. It was a great video that was crafted by Professor Megan Davis with Rachel Perkins. It was a wonderful piece, and it gives you a really great history around the legacy that's been left by our elders in that space. If you want to share with others, Ashum has done a study guide to go with that video. You can purchase them for $1. They're $1 lifetime access, these resources, and we can all do that, and you can do that online. And you can use it not just in schools, but in your workplaces. Share it, give it around, in whatever field of influence you have. If it's a volunteer in a sporting club, what a great movie night to have together to watch that video. It's really important that we engage people in places that you wouldn't expect. Ultimately, and if you have a pen, you have power. If you know how to use that pen, you have power. You also have a voice, and you can use that, and you can use that to support. And thanks, Ashum, for posting the how to do a submission guide. It's a really good one sitting on the site. There's a couple of Facebook pages. There's From the Heart and there's the Uluru Dialogue. We've put them in our newsletters. Please check them out. They give you more. The date has been extended to the 30th of April. So you've got an extra month to put a submission in. Have a read of ours. Thanks, Sally, for the compliment. I appreciate it. It was, it's not easy writing a big submission, but you don't have to do big submissions either. Just to, something from the heart, your heart as individuals is what we're after, I think, in terms of getting the message across. And finally, thank you. And if you're interested in, this is my plug, sorry, because I do it because I hosted it. If you guys want to become a member of Rec SA, just visit our site and become a member. It's $40 to be a member at Reconciliation SA. That just helps us release our newsletters, host forums like this, pay for Zoom platforms like this, and to have wonderful speakers on board. And I really would like to say thank you to you all. You're all very precious people, and I really appreciate knowing you, and I really appreciate hearing what you have to say today. And thank you.
Thank you, Shona, and thank you for highlighting young people as well, young leaders. I think that's something that people, as a young Aboriginal elder youth now, it's always great to see that being done. It's amazing. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Shona. And yes, thank you for, I guess, the invitation to come and share and speak. And thank you to everyone that joined up and wanted to listen to what we had to say. I just wanted to also, I guess, let everyone know from the summer in Cairns, we kind of set up regional youth groups, I suppose. So if there are any young Aboriginal people that want to get involved, or non-Aboriginal people who want to know how they can support us, I don't know, maybe they can get in contact with you, Shona, and then you can put them on to me, and I can get them set up in that little group. And I guess, we're just trying to raise more awareness and education around the Uluru Statement. That's what that group is purely for.
Awesome.
Get your submissions in. Take them to everyone.
Absolutely. Use your voice. Voice is power. That's it. Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful Friday and a wonderful weekend.
Have a great weekend.
Safe
Yes.
Easter.
Bye.
Bye.